everyone. I'm Robin Wilt, Brightontown board member and 2020 candidate for Congress in New York's 25th Congressional District. I want to thank you for joining us again today for another COVID-19 community check-in and update. These are updates where we highlight the issues facing our frontline and our most vulnerable community members in order to raise awareness and build action around moving forward through this pandemic together with no one left behind. Today, we're going to focus on disability rights in the age of COVID-19, and we're fortunate to have this session ASL interpreted by Lauren Dearman and Alicia Brand from the Center for Disability Rights. Thank you so much for your assistance today. In introduction, I just want to give us some background here. Human Rights Watch, the global watchdog group that reports on and investigates abuses happening all over the world, recognizes that worldwide 1 billion individuals have a disability. Unfortunately, many of those individuals, sorry about that, folks. So many of those, the Human Rights Watch global watchdog groups that reports on and investigates abuses happening all over the world recognizes that worldwide 1 billion individuals have a disability. Unfortunately, many of those individuals live in conflict settings or in developing nations where they experience a range of barriers to education, to healthcare, and to other basic services. In many countries, those with disabilities are subjected to violence and discrimination. People with disabilities are often more deprived of their right to live independently, as many are locked up in institutions, shackled, or cycled through the criminal justice system. Many of these human rights abuses are the result of entrenched stigma and a lack of community-based essential services to ensure the rights of those with disabilities under the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now, here in America, 30 years after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, people with disabilities still face poverty rates nearly 3 times higher than those without disabilities. They're disproportionately more likely to live and work in conditions that are hazardous to their health and are hugely overrepresented in our nation's prisons and jails. The reality is that long before the COVID-19 pandemic, the daily isolation and restriction of freedom of movement that all of society experienced during our social distancing and sheltering protocols was already the daily reality for many people with disabilities living in institutions and mental hospitals across the world. COVID-19 actually brought many of us a glimpse of what it can be like to live under restrictions that people with disabilities endure on a routine basis. So I want to welcome our guests today and thank them for joining us in conversation. We have Chris Hildebrand and Erica Miller, and we're waiting on Helen Jones. They're all disability rights activists within our community. And I want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. And why don't we start with you, Chris? Could you just tell us about yourself and give us some background about your community involvement?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us today. Thanks for setting us up and giving us this opportunity to talk. I'm Chris Hildebrand. I've had a spinal cord injury for 30 years of my life, so lived with disability really since just a couple months before the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I've kind of seen the gradual implementation of the ADA, where there's been progress, where there has not. Currently, I'm the executive director of the Rochester Spinal Association. I teach adjunct at MCC, and I do some consulting related to disability issues as well.
Thank you so much. And Erica, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Erica Miller. I am 32, and what that means is that as I was growing up as a person with a born disability, I was kind of like the test rat, if you will, for the ADA, getting all of the kinks out. And so all of the things that we enjoy today, they were fairly new since I was growing up in the early 90s. So my experiences are much different than someone who would have grown up a decade later. I've been in this activism game, I think, probably since I learned to read and I learned about the world and, different situations. So, so that's just mostly my background. I really appreciate you inviting me here.
Well, again, I appreciate you being here. Like I said, we really try to highlight different communities that are really on the front line of this pandemic, because as we like to say here, the pandemic didn't create a lot of these problems that we're experiencing. What it did is expose the lack of public safety net that we have and exacerbated the situations of a lot of people who are already at risk in our community. So I really appreciate you all coming here and sharing your perspectives. Now, Chris, let's start with you. As someone who works at the Rochester Spinal Association, which is a disability rights organization, how have disability service organizations traditionally responded, and have they had to change that response during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure. Well, I think everything has changed during the pandemic. I don't think there really is a traditionally in this kind of scenario. I think that the disability organizations have gone through other, like our society, we've gone through other crises. I mean, thinking of post 9/11, how some of the New York City disability organizations had to respond to that, how we've had to respond to sort of a different, security world post 9/11. But responding to a pandemic is very different, and I think that all organizations have shifted. That my own organization, I think that one of the things we saw happening in the community is that a lot of people with disabilities depend on things like sanitizer and disinfectant wipes just as part of their normal routine existence. That's how some people are using those supplies as part of their personal care routine every day, all day, every year for their life. So we've been forced into competition for those supplies. Where the general populace now is going and cleaning out Wegmans and Walmart and Costco. So my organization has had to shift what we do to help people get those supplies, just so that their daily routine can be more safe. And many other organizations have had to shift, and we've certainly seen other barriers to people with disabilities being more successful in this current time. I mean, that communications access is huge. That the deaf community in New York had to sue the governor to get interpreters on the daily briefings.
Right.
So you've proactively included interpreters, and that's much appreciated. Because for somebody who's deaf, who's really where ASL is their primary language, the captions are not the same. Captions are essentially a second language. So interpreters are important for that community to be able to access the information that everybody else is getting. So certainly some organizations had to shift to focus on that kind of advocacy. We've seen the terrible stories coming out about, the situations in nursing facilities, and I'll certainly leave that to Erica to expand on, but problems that we knew were there have definitely been exposed as even worse and come to the light for the general population too.
Thank you so much for that perspective. And yeah, we call it disability rights, but it really is about accessibility and making sure that everybody has equal access to what we provide. So, and a livelihood, an equitable livelihood. So, thank you so much for talking about it, framing the issue in that way. And we will move to you now, Erica. We mentioned a little bit about what's going on the state level. The state, of course, has passed its budget, and at the state level, austerity budgets are being proposed. Even during this time of extreme need, already Governor Cuomo has endorsed cuts to Medicaid, and which of course disproportionately impacts certain communities. So have programs for people with disabilities seen pressure under this current regime?
Well, Robin, to be frank, it feels like Governor Cuomo sneezes and wants to attack Medicaid. This was happening even before COVID. It just felt like every turn every time the state has to find some kind of money. Oh, Medicaid, we're spending too much on Medicaid. We're spending too much on services in the community. And that's absurd. We're spending too much money on nursing facilities. We could easily take quite a bit of that money that's going towards nursing facilities and institutions and give it to community services. And then we wouldn't have found ourselves in the situation that we're in currently, with the nursing facilities being ultimately morgues as they were. And I get that that's a little morbid, but really it's just a hotbed for the pandemic. And frankly, I don't feel like we're talking about it as much as we really should. I don't think that the community is taking it as seriously with the nursing facilities as they should, and checking on their family members and getting them out of there. I understand for every situation that's not going to work, but in this dire situation, in order to help people stay alive, we need to find alternate situations. And with the fact that the state government would even think about cutting Medicaid, I'm on attendant services myself. I have a person come in just to help me keep my environment clean and help me cook. Without that, I don't know how I would continue to live, because food is an important function of your life. And if you don't have a way to prepare food for yourself or go to the grocery store, there are many people in our community that are isolated. Yeah. And if no one checks on them, they don't have a way to get the items that they need, the services they need. So making one decision, like making any kind of cut to Medicaid, is just kind of like a domino effect. Right. And it seriously impacts the lives of disabled and senior people in New York State. And I'm frankly disgusted that they would even consider it. When it comes to the independent living centers that have attendant services within them, or any other organization that has attendant services, there have been impacts. When it comes to the attendant service program, if the fiscal intermediaries don't have the funds to be able to pay the attendants are not going to work for people anymore. If you were in any other service or any other industry, and all of a sudden your employer stopped paying you or significantly cut what you were going to be paid, you wouldn't work there anymore. You'd go find a situation that would be far more prosperous for you. And before COVID, a big talking point of mine is, while I would never want to create divisiveness in any sense, it would be far more financially beneficial for them to go to work for Taco Bell than it would to be work for me. And that's a really sad reality. I am not trying to put myself in a situation where I would want to pit myself up against any other person or industry. But the fact that someone can go and work for fast food, have a much easier time, and be paid more, is really sad to me, because that tells me that the function that they're performing for me doesn't matter to the administration. So so that's kind of where we're at right now. It's just a trickle down effect.
Right. And we've talked about this, how we frame the discussion about being fiscally responsible in our state, and whether we all are sharing in our responsibility to public good. And I think that one area that has been consistently overlooked when we talk about New York State and fiscal equity is taxing our billionaires at the rate that that is equitable for everyone. We often seek to balance our budgets on the backs of those most at risk. And this is what has created this situation where we do have frontline communities at all. And that's an area that we can potentially address through this pandemic. Now that it has been exposed, I feel like we have a responsibility to correct it. So thank you so much for highlighting that issue. And we have all been privy to the discussions about the situation in nursing homes and the disproportionate rates of death among those in nursing homes. And we should all be ashamed. We should all be ashamed by those statistics. So thank you so much for talking in those very stark terms, because it is really a matter of life and death. The decisions that we make on an economic level, on a fiscal level, they have reverberations throughout our system that ultimately, impact people's ability to live. So thanks so much for that, Erica. And now I'm going to go back to you, Chris. And now you serve on a town board, a community board with me in the town of Brighton. You're in service to the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board. And I was wondering about the efforts that you're engaged in at a town level to further disability rights and accessibility rights. Do you feel that Brighton is better positioned as compared to other towns, or what is your take on what's your perspective on that?
Sure. Well, I think that Brighton is ahead of the curve of many towns. I think that in terms of disability, I think that maybe the best win to it is just that we're equally included at the table in terms of moving forward with diversity and inclusion. That the board itself got off to a slow start, and then the pandemic has certainly slowed us down. But at least disability was equally included to that point. It has been equally slowed down with all the other really good work that needs to be done. That whether it's talking about race or gender issues or disability, that we're all there. There's a cross section. There's talk of where those issues overlap and interact with one another. Sexual orientation, religion, all these different statuses, all these different things that make us what we are individually and as a community. They interact with each other, and it's important to have them all represented. And I think at least in Brighton, we've moved in that direction, and then still have a lot of work to do to actually succeed in our mission. But we're on the same boat together. Maybe, I don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
It's definitely been a journey.
Again.
It's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, right. We're in a journey, whether it's on a boat or a wagon wheel, I don't know. But that we're working together towards a better future. So I think that's at least a very positive part. And certainly there's access issues to deal with in the community and the county and the state and the federal, and
Yeah, I love that you point out the fact that in Brighton, at that Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board, we have so many different perspectives represented. And I wish we could get Helen Jones on here, who also serves on that board, to represent that perspective of somebody who identifies in many different intersecting ways that can impact an equitable outcome. And we have so many voices around the table, and we are trying to give priority to a diversity of perspectives and make sure that those who are most directly impacted by these issues they're actually around the table and working to implement policy. And I think that's what we lack often. When we talk about our state budgets, we're not talking about all voices being represented. When we talk about, our goal at the town level is to create an inclusion, diversity, and equity action plan. And unless we have all of the voices around the table of those who are directly impacted by the issues that we're discussing, we can't make any progress. And so thank you so much for your service in that regard, because you bring a wealth of perspective. And I'm seeing that Helen might be with us now, though perhaps muted. Is Helen, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, this is Chris. I'm trying to work with Helen to unmute herself. I don't know why it's not working, but she'll, if she's able to do it.
Can you hear me, Robin?
We can hear.
Sorry, guys, I've been here the all time.
Oh, you've been here. Okay. Well, that's actually a good thing, because now you can weigh in precisely where we left off. I'm glad you could at least get the benefit of hearing the discussion, even if you were not part of it.
Yeah.
So Helen, please take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about your activism within the community.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you for the invite. It's an honor to be part of your campaign. Actually, first of all, I miss walking with you.
I miss walking with you as well.
Yeah. Thank you. So, my name is Helen Kiprone, and also Helen Jones. That's my kind of name that I'm trying to get it off. But I'm so glad and honored to be part of this invitation today. I am a single parent. I'm totally blind, and I usually tease and say I have deceiving eyes. So you might think I'm looking at you. So if my camera is looking at the wall, just let me know you can't see me. Yes, and so I had you, Chris, saying you kind of had some, you became disabled also like 30 years ago. That's exactly what happened to me. In 1990, the beginning of that year, I completely went blind. And actually, I live in Kenya, so I didn't get all the opportunities and the great things we have in this country. And so I grew up there, and 20 years ago, I was very actually blessed to move to America, which I've been able to get access to a lot of things that I wasn't able to have in Kenya. So I don't know if you have any question, but that's me. I have a very cute 6-year-old son, and I'm so proud of him. He's very smart.
Yeah, you have a very bright, very cute son, and I miss him as well. So Helen, we were talking about your service on the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board. And I wanted to get your perspective on what we're engaged in to further accessibility rights, and about how you feel Brighton is positioned as compared to other towns and communities on this issue of inclusion, diversity, and equity.
Thank you, Robin, for that wonderful question. First of all, I am proud to be part of Brighton, live in town of Brighton. Town of Brighton actually is one of the most accessible places, besides they kind of remove, I believe, bus number 48. There was a little challenge over to people who live on that side trying to get to U of R. But being a part of diversity and inclusion has been a good thing. You know, we're still working to get somewhere, but I like the committee itself. I think people there are very understanding, we are working on doing something. I wasn't able to be there in January because my brother had a brain injury in Kentucky, and I missed in February. I went to my mom's memorial service, and then here we are with the COVID-19 right now. But I believe there is, Chris and I have been there. I believe there is a lot of hope and a lot of things that we can do to bring awareness in our community. And also, you know, so I think that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, and do you feel as a disability rights advocate, you're intersecting identities that as a Black woman and immigrant, how do you think those issues affect your advocacy?
That is a very good question. I think just coming out to just everything else, not just being part of the inclusion in the town of Brighton. As a Black woman, a blind woman, a lady with the accent, appearance doesn't really look, it doesn't fit like pretty much most of the places. uh, which is, I think you come back to Dakar is a lot. I remember, which I really don't, I feel great sharing this because this is a lot of people face this out there. I had a very big battle when I was getting my son for the child custody. Just being a blind woman was a problem. Being an immigrant was another problem. I remember one of the legal counsel I was using told me, he said, oh, you don't have so much right for your son because you're not actually from here. And I'm thinking, are you serious? I gave back to him. But I think also that brings to the fact I can see that a blind parent can raise a child. And that is not true. The problem is people, they need to give us that opportunity. And I think it come back with the diversity group. If we are there and we send a message out, this is what we can do. There are things also like sighted people cannot do. There are things that Chris can do being in the wheelchair. He can drive a car, I cannot. But we can all do something and we can all, there's something we cannot all do.
Right.
Yeah, but I think the point is that not giving up. If somebody else tell you can do it, you keep trying. My life, I feel like a tiger in a hole. When somebody throw a stone, you use it at advantage and step on it and keep rising up.
Right. I really appreciate, you know, your spirit in that regard, but at the same time, that disparity of treatment that you told us about within the court system. You know, we talk about justice being blind and really everybody being on an equal footing when we access our court systems. To hear that your specific disability, your blindness would be called out as a factor in your ability to have standing within that court is deeply troubling, deeply concerning. But you bring up another issues. You know, right now we have families that are in lockdown and are homeschooling. This has been a huge change for everybody, but it must be especially hard for children with disabilities. Chris and Erica, actually everyone, can you speak to how schools have fared with accommodating children with disabilities in this era of remote learning?
Thank you, Robin, for that. You want to go ahead first, Chris? Go ahead, and then I'll come in.
Okay, I can start and then leave the important things. I'll leave the important things for Helen to say. Yeah, and I think that school districts vary. I mean, I think that in good times, school districts, there are some school districts that do a good job of providing the right accommodations for students, and there are, you know, some districts that do a terrible job and fight tooth and nail against doing the right thing. So certainly that's, you know, played forward into this time, and you know, the school from home for some students is probably a benefit. For some, it's probably a bigger challenge, that if you are in a situation where the parents are able to be home and support schooling, and you're either with the parents or through the school district, you're able to get the accommodations in order to get learning needs met, whether you're a student with disabilities or otherwise. Like, you know, things can go very well right now, or things can go very poorly if the parents are, you know, essential workers and they have to be out working and they have to be earning the money to put the food on the table. They're not there to provide the support that's necessary, or if the school district isn't supporting the child or the parents with accommodations that are necessary, then it could also definitely go very poorly.
Yeah. I the parent who wears a lot of different hats, I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, my efforts at relearning everything in 7th grade have gone, yeah, at best.
I'm in 10th grade and with my son, and it's been a challenge to say the least. Even as a neurotypical child, he just not being in the classroom anymore, not having that social interaction. He's somebody who's very outgoing, and he misses it, and it impacts his ability to learn in this environment. So I want to go to Erica. Do you have anything to add on this topic?
Yes. So, when it comes to the children, so I was in school probably about 20 years ago. Many of the things that I had to fight for as a child with a physical disability, people are still fighting for today. When I was going through elementary school, they didn't want me to go into the mainstream classes, even though my intellectual disability was only a technical definition through spina bifida. Developmental. They made wild assumptions about my abilities because I was in a wheelchair, and because at the time, frankly, there wasn't a lot of information, not as much as there is now, about my disability. So because of that bias, I was put in situations that I absolutely should not have ever been put in. My mother had to fight tooth and nail to get me every single thing I needed. And when it came to when I first went into school in kindergarten, first grade, just getting them to understand that I needed a nurse a couple of times a day was too much for them, even though they already had one. Getting her to do this one extra task that I needed to be able to be successful in the classroom was too much. And I know that it still happens today because I've linked up with, previously I lived in Florida, and I've linked up with a parent group there, and I'm seeing the same things. Just last year, a little boy had to fight in a court case for access to a nurse so that he could enter school. He had the same disability that I do.
Wow.
And it's really atrocious. And you would think that being in 2020, we would have more legal arguments, we would have the law on our side, we would have all of these measures put into place to protect children now. But frankly, there's so much that administrations still don't understand about our community, or maybe they just simply don't care. I don't really want to speak on their behalf, but having COVID keep everyone at home brings even more interesting challenges, because frankly, there's a high rate of abuse in our community. And now, where not just disabled children, but children in general, where they had some kind of respite away from abusive family members or caregivers, now they're stuck at home with them. And just this past week, we saw a woman who drowned her child. After already making an attempt, she didn't have any onlookers to stop her. I'm not saying that COVID had anything to do with it. She might have still done it, but we're placing our children in really dangerous situations by forcing them to have to stay home with their abusers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg on some of the issues that aren't being talked about right now. I think that it's really important to have social interaction with other children, because ableism just will run rampant. It already does. but it will get even worse if there's no interaction with other children that have disabilities. Because who's teaching the ableists about us? Who's teaching them that we aren't actually different than them?
Right.
Who's teaching them that it's not okay to make ugly remarks or say horrible things about disabled people if you're not having that interaction and not having those life lessons? So there's a lot that I'm worried about right now, just in this whole COVID crisis. But I'm hoping that once COVID ends, maybe we can actually start to acknowledge these problems that happen. The fact that there are so many children that don't have access to food.
Right.
And school was the only thing feeding them.
Yeah. Our public institutions being shuttered right now has really disproportionately impacted certain communities, and those who are most in need, they end up without any of the resources that were being provided through these public institutions, and not everybody can hop on the internet to access these services. Not everybody can has the transportation infrastructure to access these services. So it's an area of inequity that has definitely been highlighted during this pandemic. And you talk about the rates of domestic violence; those have also gone up dramatically during the pandemic. And so, we have a lot of issues just by dint of people being isolated and that lack of interaction, lack of public interaction. So, Helen, I want to close out the conversation with you weighing in on this topic, and then we'll go to action items, because I really do like to leave people with a means to get involved in advocacy for these topics that we're discussing. So Helen, do you want to add anything to?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Robin, again. So the biggest challenge that has been, maybe I could speak more like with the blind kids who are going to school at the moment, is some of them do Braille. Now they are home with their parents, and the parents can really write Braille. The teachers will try to reach out. Okay, this is how you do .1. What does mean? So it has been a big challenge for blind kids at the moment, just having that social interaction with their teachers. Because as blind, we do most of the things with touching, which that doesn't happen now in the blind community. Another thing is when it comes to Zoom, and our students have to be there in the Zoom and try to see things. What about the things that they are graphic, that they are not able to see that? Sometimes the voiceover can be hard to use. We're doing tapping, you can be a little bit late, or it could not just work, just get you out to be able to be there. Or when too many people in the same Zoom have been, talking to kids who are students at the moment during the COVID, it's very hard for them. It's a big challenge. I also with the part of Camp Smile for blind kids that we do that in the summer, we'll not be able to have camp. We had to cancel the camp because social distance is not going to work for kids in the camp. Because definitely they will need to be, Robin, you experienced that, you and I going for a walk, we have to be right there next to each other. So it's not going to be possible for blind kids this summer. And we're going to try to do like a virtual camp, but we really don't know if we're going to be able to do it. We're still trying to find our ways out there, to find people with more technology that they can be helped, or a space for the staff to be able to help the kids with in their camp. Thank you so much, Robin.
Oh, no, thank you, Helen. And it's true, that level of interaction when you're guiding, which I have done. I've guided people while walking, while running, and in interactive sports. You lose that level of interaction during a pandemic where you're so concerned about the transmission of the disease. So That's a really important point to make, especially for our blind community. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
I wish we had more time to discuss all of these issues. Can we leave with some action items for folks who would like to help, if they'd like to get involved with any of the organizations that you are involved with? Can we point them in that direction? We'll start with you, Chris.
Sure. I mean, if people want to get involved, I'm RochesterSpinalAssociation.org. It's long, it's hard to spell, but RochesterSpinalAssociation.org. Probably more crucially, I think, is around like the action we take as a community. And I think that where COVID has challenged us, one of the things hopefully we will be able to come out and focus on, and let's not say hopefully, like we have to do this, and it's not through hope. I mean, it's through action. That we have now come to, I think, a better understanding of what is essential in our community. Things like home care workers are essential and need to be paid like they are essential. And it's not acceptable to do otherwise. Teachers, as Robin and I were sharing our experience of being, trying to do our day jobs and this other thing and teach our own kids, like it's hard. So I think that essential workers, I mean, of all sorts, we really need to put an emphasis on paying them and maybe not paying quite so much for some of the luxuries and frivolous people who think they're very important in our society, but maybe are not so much.
Thank you. I always like to say that, it's not rocket science how we educate our kids. We actually do have to commit resources to the problem. We have to, the amount of Title I funding, for instance, that we have in our schools is just way too penurious. And we need to make sure that our kids have access to the funding to make sure that everybody receives an equitable education. Erica, can we have some pointers for you?
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to the disability community, there are groups out there that are fighting for our rights. Adopt is one of them. If you want to know about more local things, I'm always happy to talk to anyone. You can always send them my direction. And I would say for my disabled people, I'm speaking to you disability community right now. Rights are intersectional. Get involved in all groups. We have a really great group in Rochester that deals with Black Lives Matter. Get involved with them. I don't see enough disabled people at the rallies or events or protests or anything. Get involved with trans rights. Get involved with LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights. Get involved in everything. Visibility is really important in making these different actions grow and make a difference. It can't be one group doing all of the work.
So true. So true. We definitely are stronger together. So thank you so much for pointing out that intersectionality. And Helen, will end with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again, Robin. So if you are please able to help us with ideas for a camp, virtual camp this year for the Camp Smile, Robin, you have my information. If anybody is willing to have any ideas how we can do the virtual camp for the blind children, we really appreciate. It's kind of even sad at the moment, our Secretary of Education don't really know much about the special education. So right. We're wishing you the best also with your campaign. And thank you so much for the invitation. And we can use our time in another better way than to be with you today. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And we will annotate the comments of the Facebook Live to make sure that people can reach out to everybody who is on the Zoom and the organizations with which they're involved. And in conclusion, I just want to remind us that with localities and countries now just beginning to ease our lockdowns that were put in place to stop the spread of the coronavirus, most of us can better empathize with what it's like to be cooped up in one place and the toll that that can take on our mental and physical well-being. Our lockdown was temporary, but imagine what it must be like if this were the norm, living in isolation, deprived of friends and freedom, not just for weeks, but for years, and in some cases until you die. Globally, this is the case for far too many people with disabilities. Sound disability policy must recognize the uniqueness of each disability, and we've talked about a lot of them today, some of which are not visible, and the commensurate uniqueness of the needs associated with each disability that existing policies have failed to address. We have to commit to establishing laws, collecting data, and developing programs that ultimately recognize that developmental, hearing, mental, mobility, and vision issues are unique. We have to reject ableism that shapes our current inclusion initiatives and center the most impacted communities. We have to recognize that increasing accessibility will spur new jobs and economic growth and programs, products and services that will create opportunities for everyone to equitably pursue their lives. We have to guarantee healthcare, including mental health care, home and community-based services and supports without wait lists or asset or income restrictions as a human right to everyone in America. Ensure Medicaid coverage of hearing, magnification, and mobility aid. Expand funding for research into treatments and cures, such as passage of HR 2620, the Faster Treatments and Cures for Eye Diseases Act, and end sub-minimum wage for workers with disabilities while guaranteeing jobs and living wages in the community for all. We have to expand and increase effective enforcement of the ADA, pass the Disability Integration Act in order to establish a clear standard for the delivery of high quality services, and enact the Social Security Caregiver Credit Act to compensate the more than 43 million unpaid caregivers for their work. So we have a lot of work to do, and we hope that people will get involved. And again, please stay safe and stay sheltered as much as you can, even as we start to reopen. Thank you so much to all of you for this discussion today. It's been very enlightening. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.